Hi everyone, it's Anne from Vitae Sports here, and today we are very lucky to be joined by a World Cup winning coach. Hope you enjoy our interview with Paul.
Great to see you, mate. How are you doing?
Good, Darren. How are you? All good?
Yeah, not too bad, mate. Missing the cricket, but apart from that, we're okay.
Excellent. Yeah, no, it's been tough, hasn't it? I mean, it's obviously all the plans and preparation that you put in during the winter, all the fitness work and the practice that the players put in, and then you come to this, which none of us have ever experienced before. It's a very unusual set of circumstances, and with obviously none of us having experienced anything like this before, you just don't know how long it's going to last for. But it's out of our hands, really, isn't it? It's guided by government and people far more intelligent and better suited to guiding us than you and I think, mate.
Well, definitely me. What's your gut feeling, mate, on the your potential for cricket this summer?
Well, I'm obviously very hopeful. I mean, I think it's really important for us to keep thinking that we're going to play. We keep planning that we're going to play, and I think we've got to keep sending that message to the players, because one of the things that in all professional teams, a lot of the reason why players are in the teams that they're in is because they like playing team sports. They're very competitive. They like being a team environment. And as much as they're missing the on-field competition, they'll also be missing the changing room, the crack that everybody has in there, the fun, the enjoyment. I mean, you talk to any former professional sports with any sport, they'll always say the thing I missed most was the day-to-day fun and banter in the changing room. And, we've got a lot of people who are, they thrive on that environment. They thrive on the competitive side of it. They thrive on the fun and enjoyment being around a team. And when you're in lockdown and you're at home on your own, and some players living on their own, that's quite tough for them. So, for me, the biggest concern for our players isn't their physical well-being, it's actually their mental well-being. And we're putting a lot of time and effort into making sure that we're looking after our players the best we possibly can. It's not easy, and we've got some good experts helping us, but we're definitely, like a lot of team sports and like a lot of businesses, I guess, we're doing everything we can to look after the people that are part of our setup.
Yeah. Well, I mean, hopefully we get back in action sooner rather than later. But we're just going to catch up today. We want to have a chat a lot about your coaching career. You've had an incredible career from all ends of the spectrum, really. And we chatted about, obviously starting with Sri Lanka, went over to Kent, and then you just had this incredible spell after Kent where you went into Yorkshire seconds, and within a very short period, sort of 4-month period, you'd gone from Yorkshire second team coach to Sri Lanka head coach to winning the Asia Cup and winning the 2020 World Cup for the first time ever for Sri Lanka. So just, I remember we chatted quite a lot at that time about the decisions you had to make, and it was obviously it was just an incredible, probably no one's ever had such an exciting short period in cricket. But just tell us a little bit how that all came about from when you'd gone from Yorkshire into Sri Lanka.
Well, I think I was really lucky that I had some experiences that didn't go well for me. And it's all very well when you have chats and conversations with people that have been involved in sport. They always talk about the good stuff, but I think the biggest turning point for me in my coaching experience was getting the sack at Kent. And that hurt because it was my club. I still live in Kent. I've always pretty much lived in Kent. And I grew up wanting to play for Kent, and I was lucky enough to play a few games for Kent. I coached the second team in the academy, went off to Sri Lanka the first time. So when I had the opportunity to be head coach at Kent, that was one I couldn't turn down. And I didn't do a very good job of it, if I'm really honest. I made a lot of mistakes. I was very passionate about the club, and I'm still very passionate about Kent Cricket Club, and I want Kent to do well, as long as it's not against the team that I'm with at that particular time. But I always want Kent to do well. So to get the sack at Kent was a big lesson for me. And I had 3 months out of the game before I went to Yorkshire. And in that 3 months, I took stock of where I'd been, what I'd done, and the mistakes that I'd made. And I own my mistakes. It's very easy to point the finger and blame other people and say, this happened, this person, whatever. Forget that. It's about me. And I know that I had a tough time. And that great saying that gets trotted out against managers and coaches in sport, that you lost the dressing room. Well, I did. And it was, it was purely on the basis of passion. It was passion that I wanted the team to win. I wanted players to play well. And it was my first time as being a head coach. And I didn't cope with all the expectation that came with it very well. And I took it very personally. I think that was the biggest learning thing for me. I took every bad day and every bad session personally. And then I dumped my anxiety on the players. So when we were going brilliantly, I was on the roof. I was bouncing around. When we were struggling, I found that tough to get that balance right. And one of the reasons I went to Yorkshire was that Martyn Moxon had such a good reputation in English cricket, had done a brilliant job at Yorkshire, went to Durham, did a brilliant job there, back to Yorkshire, had coached with England Lions, been involved with the England setup, played for England, obviously being a fantastic county player. And he was someone that every time I played against Yorkshire, watched Yorkshire, he seemed very calm, he seemed very organised, very logical, always spoke sense at coaches' meetings. And I had this opportunity to go and work for him. And I have to say, the 2 years I spent at Yorkshire with him and Jason Gillespie, and Dizzy came in to be the first team coach when I joined to be second team coach. And I have to say that 2 years I spent at Yorkshire is the happiest I've spent in the game of cricket as a coach. Yeah. And all three of us were very content in our roles, but we challenged one another in a good way, but none of us wanted each other's jobs. And that was also really important. It was a very stable environment, and we were brought in to do a specific job, and it was absolutely brilliant. Some very, very good players, Root Balance, Bairstow were coming through and on the fringes and playing some England stuff. So, excellent. Andrew Gale was captain, had been a fantastic player for Yorkshire. And then, we had Side Botham, Adil Rashid. We had some very, very good players. Stephen Patterson, day in, day out, excellent county cricketers. So, and then Plunkett and Brooks came into the group as well. So we actually had, an excellent all-round team. And that was a great experience for me. And then from there to Sri Lanka, took over from Graham Ford, who I'd worked with at Kent. So Graham had been the Sri Lankan coach, and I took over from him. And it was just a brilliant opportunity for me to go into a team that Fordy had done a good job with. And we were coming up to the Asia Cup and the T20 World Cup in Bangladesh. And it was just a great time to get in and get involved. And I'd got my confidence back. Having lost my job at Kent, I got my confidence back. I was quite confident, but I'd also learned that, I had to be responsible for my actions, because that is absolutely vital, in any sport as a coach or a manager.
Yeah, I remember at the time, you brought back some memories for me that you actually, part of you did consider staying in Yorkshire, didn't it? You weren't dead certain that you were going to go for Sri Lanka. You were enjoying it that much. And, and I remember saying there was quite a few politics going on at the time when you come into that role. Obviously no regrets now, but you did that. But what was it like going into you've gone from a very safe environment, I suppose it's fair to say, settled environment, to the complete opposite. Although you coached in Sri Lanka before, you're still going outside your comfort zone massively. So tell me what it was like when you landed in Sri Lanka, and how did you survey the landscape, and what did you do about it?
Well, the one difference that I had to contend with that I didn't have when I went the first time. When I went the first time, Trevor Bayliss was the head coach, and he'd just taken the job in Sri Lanka, and he asked me to go and be his assistant, and that went through the Sri Lankan board. So I went with Trevor, a guy called Tommy Simsek was Australian physio, and Jade Roberts was the Australian S&C that Trevor had brought. So the four of us came together, 3 Australians, myself, very similar senses of humour, well, apart from Trev. We had a pretty similar sense of humour. We all got on well. We lived together. We travelled together. We worked together. So we spent a lot of time together. When I went the second time, I inherited a complete backroom team of locals, of Sri Lankans. And that was one of the reasons that the Sri Lankans were keen on me taking the role, because I understood Sri Lankan culture, I understood the people, And so I inherited a backroom staff, which was, had Marvan Atapattu in it, who'd been one of Sri Lanka's best players. Chaminda Vas, undoubtedly one of the best seam bowlers to come out of Asia. To play 100 test matches as a seamer in Asia is an exceptional effort. So I inherited this group of Sri Lankans. Obviously, I don't speak Sri Lankan. I know a few phrases. There's a few similar phrases that I know. So I inherited not only a strong playing group, but a strong coaching group with very strong views. And there would have been a few in that group who would have wanted to be the head coach, and Marvan did end up replacing me as the head coach. So there was definitely a lot going on behind the scenes, and in many ways, I think it was almost an advantage that because I didn't speak the local language, I didn't pick up on all the tittle tattle and gossip and whispers and chat, and I just went on and I kept going. What I tried very much to do was to involve those coaches day to day. And one of the first things that I did, I had the manager that I'd inherited, Graham Ford. It would be fair to say Graham Ford and the manager didn't necessarily have the greatest relationship. It was a bit of a battle and a challenge. Yeah. And so I decided that I was going to meet this new manager head on, and I was going to bash him into my shape rather than let him bash me into his shape. And we had a strong first meeting, and he basically refused to come to my coach's meeting and said that the meeting would be at another venue at another time to suit him. And I said, no, if you're not at my meeting, then we're going to crack on without you. Everyone else will be there. It's your choice. And he came to our meeting. And it was a massive win for me, because after about half an hour of that meeting, and he didn't want to be there, and he was quite awkward. After about half an hour, I spoke to him and addressed him in front of the group. And I told him that I loved his passion. I knew he had an edge, and I didn't mind that, but I wanted his edge and his passion in my camp and not fighting against me. And from that moment on, we got on brilliantly, and we still to this day get on brilliantly, which is that was really important for me. It was important that I stood my ground. It was important that I didn't just give in. And it would have been really easy. I've got no international cricket as a player behind me. I've got no name as a player behind me. So I was going in very much about, actually what I could help the team with and understanding their culture. And the great thing about the Sri Lankans, if you understand their culture and you understand them as people, and you give everything to them, they will give everything to you. And I'm really, I can look back on that 2014 period, 6-7 years later, and I still get messages from players and coaches in Sri Lanka and staff, wishing me well at various times of the year. And that's really important to me, because, as much as you want to go and have success and help your team win, it's also important that it's about building personal relationships. And I look at those more fondly. So when I get a message from Nuwan Kulasekara, a couple of weeks ago saying, hope you're well, coach, hope your family are well, we have a bit of chat about our families, that's more important than looking at any medals that I might have on my sideboard for me.
Of course. So you got a very short time to get you've just taken over sort of Christmas, the year of 2013. Very short time. You got two massive tournaments coming up. The Asia Cup, which would imagine would be a massive tournament to Sri Lanka, followed straight by the T20 World Cup. So tell us how you went about your very short preparation time. What did you do?
Well, the key, the Asia Cup, I think I went without any real high expectations. I thought it was a brilliant opportunity, because it was in Bangladesh. It was a brilliant opportunity for us to use that to learn about how we were going to play the T20 World Cup in Bangladesh 2 months later. And so I thought it was a brilliant opportunity to bring the group together. And I spent a lot of time listening. I spent a lot of time watching, and I spent a lot of time working out who the key people were going to be for us going into the World Cup itself. And yet, your Mahela Jayawardene, Kumar Sangakkars, of course they're going to be like your main players. There's a lot of focus on them, but who around them were going to help me to gel that team together. So we used that Asia Cup. And I think we didn't really talk about winning the Asia Cup, and Sri Lanka had only won the Asia Cup once outside of Sri Lanka ever. And that was actually when Trevor Bayliss and I were first together. We beat India in the final in Pakistan back in 2008. And it was Ajantha Mendis burst onto the scene. He bowled the Indians out 6 for 13, 6 for 14 in the final, which was fantastic. So I think I used that tournament to get to know the coaches, to get to know the players and understand them in a competitive environment, and see how we could learn from the experience of being in Bangladesh. And that for me was absolutely key. That was vital. And then when we went back to, and obviously we ended up winning that. We beat Pakistan in the final. It was a close, tense game. We'd beaten India well, and we ended up winning that final, I would say, reasonably comfortably, but it was a tight game. And it was a great learning experience for me about the players in that group.
Yeah, it was you won by 5 wickets in the end, didn't you? I think that one.
I think we did. And as I say, it looked probably more comfortable than it actually was. Syed Ajmal was always a tough opponent for us. And I remember, one of the things I do remember about that final was that we had this plan that we were going to just see Syed Ajmal out, and we weren't going to take any risks against him. We weren't worried about how many runs he went for, as long as he didn't take any wickets. And I never forget, and there's always this thing about, English players in particular, we're not very good about playing spin. Well, and the Sri Lankans are supposed to be fantastic. And I remember Syed Ajmal bowling about his 8th over, his 10-over spell, and it was a maiden over. And our whole changing room clapped at the end of it because we hadn't lost a wicket. Now, it just shows you how the pressure and tension can get to a team. And there's a team that they've grown up playing against some of the best spin bowlers in the world on some of the best spin surfaces. And we all clapped a maiden over against us because we hadn't lost a wicket. And it just shows how, even international level, how people's psyche is, and a lot of club players could resonate with that. With the T20 World Cup, I think I had an unbelievable amount of luck, and you need a bit of luck along the way. And we got back to Bangladesh, and we picked 5 spinners because there was no dew during the Asia Cup. So we picked 5 spinners for the T20 World Cup. And I'll come back to the dew in a moment because it played a massive part in that World Cup, as thunderstorms did for England in that World Cup. But we had a team chat in our hotel in Chittagong, and it became quite obvious in our team chat that we were going to have a discussion about the batting order. And I got the manager, the selector on tour, and the captain and vice captain, and Dinesh Chandimal was the captain, Lasith Malinga vice captain, and we sat downstairs in our meeting room that we had designated at the hotel, and I said to all of them, we need to be clear now what the batting order looks like, because we have to make a decision on what we're going to do with our batting order. And I'll never forget, nobody really wanted to make a suggestion. Everyone was hedging their bets because it involved Mahela and Sangha, our biggest and our most experienced 2 players. And the great thing was that just as the tournament was about to get started, we started playing some practice games. Mahela did an interview for ICC television, and he said this was going to be his last T20 World Cup, so it was his last chance to win it. And the next day, Sangha did an interview and said exactly the same. Now, there were people back in Sri Lanka saying that, we shouldn't have taken both of them. And that there was a bit of internal conversation about that. So there was a bit of pressure on to take both of them too. But I was adamant we needed to take them. And what it did, it played into my hands that I then used the motivation of 2 of the greatest players the country had ever produced, having never won the T20 World Cup. This was our chance for them 2 guys to win a World Cup. And they'd not been part of a Sri Lankan World Cup winning team. They'd been in quite a few semi-finals. They'd been in quite a few finals, but they'd never won. So I use that as motivation. And I'll come back to the day of the final in a little while. But so we had this team meeting, this selection meeting, and I ring up to both Mahela and Sangha's rooms and I asked them to come down. Now, Mahela, I'd always thought should open the batting. But it was obvious in that little meeting we had that the selectors didn't want him to open. And so therefore, I had to tell him, and I took responsibility for telling him he was going to bat 3. So I got him down into the room with Sangha, and I said, listen, we've had a chat, and this is the plan. The batting order is going to be Dilshan opening with Kaushal Janith Pereira, and you're going to bat 3, and Sangha, you're going to bat 4. And Mahela absolutely tore into me. He laid into me. And he said, if you mess this up, I will never forgive you. This is our best chance to win a World Cup. And he tore into me. And I said, listen, I'm telling you now before we start the tournament, so there's no messing around. There's no grey area. This is what we're doing. This is our best top 4. And this is what we're going to stick to throughout the tournament. And this is how we're going to win the tournament. And as I say, he wasn't very happy. And he and I have always got on brilliantly, and we get on brilliantly to this day. And he's been a great friend and a great supporter to me. But he really wasn't happy. And I looked at Sangha and I said, are you happy? And he said, I don't know why you got me down here. I was always batting 4. And I said, okay, fine, no problem. And it was great because, it was a chance for me to send a message to everybody that I was taking responsibility. I wasn't going to let other people run with responsibility. And as it transpired, the captaincy changed during the tournament as well. And we very, very nearly went out of the tournament against New Zealand. We only got about 120 odd in a game at Chittagong. And Rangan Herath played his first game, got 5 for 3, turned the game literally on its head. Absolute genius. And we went through to the semi-final and the rest was history. But we did lose to England in Chittagong. Alex Hales got a brilliant 100. Mahela got about 80 odd. There was controversy over that. England thought they caught him at cover. Michael Lum diving forward. Umpires decided it was not out. Mahela only got 80. And as I say, Hales played brilliantly for his 100 and England beat us. But it was a good lesson for us. It just refocused us a little bit. So, and if you remember in that tournament, England got knocked out by the rain in the end. They lost to Holland in the last game, but they were already out by then. And they lost the game against New Zealand when they stayed on and played through a thunderstorm just to finish the 5 overs of New Zealand's batting. And it was it's one of the worst storms I've ever seen. And they stayed on. I should never have finished the game, but and that's the fine margins in a tournament, and particularly in T20 cricket. It was an extraordinary tight tournament, and it's a really easy tournament to disappear out of. As I say, England beat us and beat us well, and yet we went on to win the tournament. And it's a very, very fine line. But as I say, just in terms of the emotions, we came to the final in Dhaka. And we beat the West Indies in the semi-final on Duckworth Lewis, but we were well ahead when the thunderstorms kicked in. And so we came to the final. We had to play India in the final. And we'd done a lot of work and a lot of research on the Indian team. And we actually had 5 analysts working overnight after every game to give us feedback on the games. And these guys were working in India. It was an India company that we had working with us. And with our analysts, we had 6 people in total. And the Indian analysts came up with this plan that the Indians attacked overs 3 and 5. So to bowl your best bowlers in overs 3 and 5. And wide Yorkers were the toughest for them to hit at the end of the innings because of the way they'd set up to hit to the leg side. So we bowled Sachitra Senanayaka and Lasith Malinga, who've been our best 2 bowlers in that tournament, overs 3 and 5. And then we came to the last 4 overs of the innings, and Nuwan Kulaseka and Lasith Malinga bowled the last 2 overs each. And so the last 4 in total, they went for 17 runs without conceding a boundary and bowled wide Yorkers. And our field settings were 2 men back at backward point and third man, and 2 gully lines on 1. So we had 4 players in that quadrant behind square on the offside, and we packed that and we bowled wide Yorkers. And as I say, 17 runs were scored, which kept their total down to, I think it was 153 we had to chase, and we won the game. But prior to that final, we always used to have the same routine with our team meetings. We would go to the meeting room in the hotel about 15 minutes before we got on the bus to go to the game, and we'd watch a short video of about 4 minutes that our analysts have put together of the previous games, of all of us hitting boundaries, brilliant stops, taking wickets, celebrations in the dugout, whatever it might be. And it was always an upbeat, uplifting video. There wasn't any real technical detail. We'd done all that. That was all done previously. And so we came to watch our video. And then I would ask one of the coaches or somebody in the room just to say a few words in Sinhala, so that everybody in the room, all the young lads, understood the team message, what was today about. and then I would throw to the manager, who would just make some comment like, "Come on, lads, let's go and get them," and we go and get on the bus and we go and play the game. That was it. And anyway, on this particular day, the analyst said to me, "Fabi, I've made another video." So I said, "Oh, look, we haven't really got time." No, please, can you watch it? So I was in the room early, so I said, "Go on, play it." And he played this unbelievably emotional 3-minute video of Mahalo and Sangha. And it finished with the pair of them walking off a game in Colombo, having won, with their arms around one another, walking off the ground. So he played this, we played the normal video. Marvan Atapattu said a few words in Sinhala. Then I just said, "Lads, we've got one more video for you to watch. Please just watch this before you pick your bags up." And we watched this video, and it finished, and I turned back to face the room, and I said to the manager, "Manager, what have you got for me?" And he was choked. He literally was choked. He couldn't speak. And I looked around, and there were people wiping tears from their eyes. It was the most moving, motivational 3-minute video I've ever seen. And I nearly said no to it. I nearly said, no, we haven't got time. And it, as I say, we played on emotions, and we played on the emotion of our team all the way through that tournament to win it. And it was an unbelievable video that finished it off. We went to the game. We won the game. We beat the Indians. Sangha was not out at the end to win it for us, having got 50, and probably his first runs in the tournament. But he got 50 in the final, and it was sensational. And the one other thing that we did right at the start of that tournament, we had a team meeting, and I said to all of the lads, we were in the manager's room where we had our meetings at the hotel in Dakar at the start of it. And I said, on this table, and I pointed to the table in his room, and I said the date was the 6th of April. And I said, the 6th of April, we will be in here that night with the trophy on the table, and we will be celebrating. That is our goal. And we will constantly think about the 6th of April being in this room with the trophy on our table. And after all the celebrations and parading around the stadium and back to the hotel and whatever, we were all sat in there, and it was about 3 o'clock in the morning. Everyone was sat around on the floor, exhausted, still in their kit, absolutely loving it, medals on. And one of the lads said, "Coach, look on the table." And there was the trophy. And it was, and in many ways, it summed it up. But it was just as I say, we had some luck, but we played massively on the emotions of the team. Yeah. And we relied heavily on the experience of the team. But it was just an unbelievable tournament. Lasith Malinga, as I say, took over as captain halfway through. And Dinesh Chandimal, unfortunately, had to miss a game because of our overrate. And then Lasith continued to be captain. And, you know, people that don't know Lasith would just see this very unorthodox bowler charging in, mop of hair, big smile, but very, very intelligent. And it was his game plan on the final with the bowlers that allowed our bowlers to match the information from the analysts to allow us to win that final. And he played an absolutely sensational part in that. And it was brilliant to see him with the trophy at the end of that tournament. But as I say, it was just it was a fantastic experience where so many things came together. But again, another great learning experience to me as a coach as well.
Yeah, it sounds like everything just come together perfectly, almost like those intangibles that you can't measure as such, which just give you that extra man almost, and that feeling that something's going to go right. So incredible win, won the World Cup. You know, you're at a place you could never even imagine 6 months prior. Then, and I know it was not all. It wasn't. The Sri Lankan authorities could be difficult at times. The Sri Lankan board. So England come knocking. They say, "We want you to come back and be the assistant coach to England." Amazing time. Must have been a difficult decision. What was your thought processes during that time, Paul?
It was incredibly difficult. And, you know, I remember speaking to you. I was on my way to Manchester for my first meeting with the ECB, or the people that they were using to make the appointments. And I remember stopping to get some fuel and chatting to you on my phone for a while about it. And it's. I
was going on my honeymoon the next day.
Yeah, that's right. You were. That's right. Were you on a cruise or something? Was that what you
That's
doing?
Right. Yeah.
And you know, I loved Sri Lanka. I've been back with England since, and you know, I absolutely love Sri Lankan people. I love the country, and yeah, it was tricky. It was tricky both times we were there, but you found a way. You found a way to deal with it. But for having never played for England and having never come close to playing for England, I looked upon this as this might be my only chance ever to work with the England cricket team. And having been with Kent's second team and then Yorkshire second team, I was never going to get a job as England's assistant coach working in second team cricket in English cricket. So I had to go overseas. I didn't go overseas to get a job with England. I went overseas because, I wanted a bit of experience of something different, and I thoroughly enjoyed both times there. But when ECB and Paul Downton asked me to speak to them, I did, and they made me an offer to join them. But I then went back to Sri Lanka. I flew back to Sri Lanka and met the entire board. And that was an extremely interesting experience, because I went back and I flew in the morning, landed early morning, went to a board meeting at about 11 o'clock. And at the end of it, there was about 17 people in this room plus me. And their board is set up, their boardroom's set up that on one side it's raised up. And I was sat on the other side. So we had 2 rows of people down one side and then another group. So I was sort of horseshoed in on my own on this side. And I said to them that I don't profess to be the greatest technical tactical coach, but I do care about people. And I think my skill is, understanding people and working with people and getting the best out of them. And, I said, I have given everything to Sri Lankan cricket. I haven't accepted the job with England, and I've come back to chat to you. And I could have easily just sent you a message saying I'm not coming back. I was still within a 6-month probationary period, and I was well within my rights not to go back, but I didn't. I went back and faced them, and I thought it was the right thing to do. And I had quite a few meetings during that day. And in the end, the lure of working for England was too much. And I went back in the next morning, spoke to the chief exec and tendered my notice and flew back. And as I say, I still have a great relationship with everyone in Sri Lanka. And I was back there with England 18 months or so ago. And all of the people that were involved when I left, I caught up with pretty much all of them and shook all of their hands. Some I had dinner with, some I had a coffee with. And I'm really pleased that I can still have that relationship. I'm sure there'd be disappointment, when a coach leaves a team, there's disappointment. It was ironic that the first series with England was against Sri Lanka when I joined Pete Moores as his assistant. And I'd spent the previous few months helping the Sri Lankans prepare for coming to England. And they beat us in the Test series. It was the great game at Headingley when Jimmy Anderson was out, penultimate ball. We batted all day to save the game. Moeen Ali got 100. Jimmy battled unbelievably. And penultimate ball, lobbed one up off the handle and got caught. Sri Lanka won the series 1-0. We'd drawn at Lord's the first test. And the interesting thing was, on about day 3 of that test match at Headingley, I passed one of the Sri Lankan bowlers on the stairs, and he said to me, Coach, I'm not bowling well. What is it? And I said, I can't help you. As much as I want to help you, I can't help you. And we both laughed. And it was a very odd experience for me, because I wanted England to win. Of course I did. It was my first series with the England team, and we lost. And I remember leaving Headingley that night with a real range of emotions, real mixed bag of emotions. Of course I wanted England to win. Of course I wanted to beat Sri Lanka. But I knew how hard the Sri Lankans had worked and prepared to beat England in England. So, in many ways, maybe I shouldn't have taken part in that series altogether. I should have perhaps steps aside, but it is what it is. And I took some sticks. Sangakkara at the Oval before the one-day series, which was played at the start. I was walking up the stairs to the changing room. There was a lot of media around, and Sangha shouted down to a few Sri Lankans, here comes the traitor, lads, don't speak to him. And there was a lot of laughter and fun, and it broke the ice a bit. But as I say, it was definitely the right decision for me. And I thoroughly enjoyed my next 5 years with the England cricket team, and I was very, very lucky to go from the Sri Lankan team to the England cricket team.
Yeah, great. Well, Paul, what we'll do, we're going to fast forward a few years. Obviously, it'd be fantastic if we could cover everything. Well, it might be for another day. But going forward to the England World Cup success, you were obviously heavily involved in the preparation for that. And I imagine that was a lot different to what you just described with Sri Lanka. So I suppose tell us a bit about you know, how the England team got to that position to win a World Cup, and you know, what the differences were, and how difficult it was for you to not be there at the very end of it all.
Yeah, I think, you know, again, we went through an extraordinary journey as a group of people over that 4-year period. Now, you know, I think it's important that we go back to the World Cup in 2015, Australia and New Zealand. You know, and everybody said it was an absolute disaster. It was one of the worst World Cups we'd had. But we went into that tournament, I think, 7th in the world, and so it was no surprise that we finished ninth. I think we didn't qualify for the quarterfinals. So, you know, we didn't play very well in that tournament, and it was a strange tournament. We'd changed the captain. Alistair Cook had lost the captaincy in about the December time after a tour to Sri Lanka. Owen Morgan took the job on, but he effectively captained Cookie's team to that World Cup. And you know, we knew that we had to change things. And Peter Moores, as the coach, knew that when we got back from that World Cup, we would have to change things. And he was party to making some quite significant changes. He and I flew back from the West Indies, and we took a very young, inexperienced team. And I think 6 people made their debut against Ireland in Dublin. And unfortunately, Pete lost his role with the England team at the end of that day. Andrew Strauss came in to replace Paul Downton. And again, Paul Downton, you know, a fantastic cricket man who, you know, I've got a lot of high regard for, and is doing a brilliant job at Kent. Since he's been at Kent, you know, he's done a sensational job there. And that's no surprise, really. So there were some changes in personnel. And I can count myself very lucky that when Andrew Strauss came in, he didn't, you know, turf me out as well. And I took on the role as sort of caretaker coach until the new coach was going to be appointed. But Owen Morgan then had the chance to captain his team and help to build his team. And the first series that we played was against New Zealand. And Morgs was absolutely instrumental. And I've said this many times, you know, Andrew Strauss, and again, Andrew, you know, wasn't able to be part of the setup all the way through to the end of that because, unfortunately, you know, as we know, his wife passed away in 2018, December 2018, and he had to step back from his role. And obviously, Ashley Giles came in and oversaw, you know, the end of that, and has now continued on that good work. So Strauss was absolutely instrumental. He appointed Trevor Bayliss as head coach, and the Trevor Bayliss-Owen Morgan combination was sensational. And obviously, my part was to help Trev to settle in. So I looked after the first series against New Zealand, but it could have all been so different. And I talked earlier about fine lines and luck. The first game against New Zealand in that 5-match one-day series in England at Edgbaston, Jason Roy out, first ball, caught, backward point. We were 200 for 6 after 30 overs. Joe Root had played brilliantly and got a great score, played fantastically well. But we were 200 for 6 with 20 overs to go. We could have been bowled out for 234 and everyone would have said nothing's changed. So much for New England's nothing's changed. Now, we weren't talking about New England, but the media were talking about this New England, a new dynamic England, whatever. We never really said that, but we knew we had to change the way we played. Yeah. And Adil Rashid, playing his first game for many, many years for England, hit his second ball for 6 down the ground. And Joss Butler played an unbelievable hand to score an outstanding 100. And it ended up with Liam Plunkett hitting 2 of the last 3 balls for 6 over mid-wicket into the Holly stand. And we got 400 for the first time ever. And we beat New Zealand. Stephen Finn bowled Brendan McCullum early on, which was a great thing for Stephen Finn, because in the previous World Cup in New Zealand, Brendan McCullum had absolutely destroyed Stephen Finn. So it was an unbelievable win for us as a team. But Owen Morgan, and the reason why he was so instrumental in England winning that World Cup, Owen talked to the players at the start of that game very briefly on the prep day about playing the way that you've been picked to play, because that's how you play for your counties. And he went out and played the way he wanted the team to play. I think he got 30 odd that day. Now, all the way through that series, he played the way that he was talking. And it's really easy for a captain to go and say, play without fear, just go and play your game, and have no fears. No recriminations when you get out and come off. No fears whatsoever. I want you to be on the attacking front for all the time. And he got an unbelievable score he got 100 at Trent Bridge. So we lost the second game at the Oval in a run chase in the rain. We lost the third game at Southampton and we dropped catches. We got bowled out in 42 overs. And both he and I said afterwards, we don't care about being bowled out in 42 overs. It's nonsense to say it's important that you bat your overs, because we said we don't care if we get bowled out in 40 overs. We're going to play our way. Yeah. And so we're 2-1 down with 2 games to go. We go to Trent Bridge. New Zealand get 350 and we were 90 for none off the first 10 overs. Hales and Roy played unbelievably well. And then Butler was out, and Butler was in. Morgan and Root were the two that both got hundreds and saw us home. And one great thing in that game happened. Alex Hales was out. Joss Butler was sat with him and myself. So 3 of us are sat together. And don't forget, 90 for none, chasing 350 in a 50-over game. And Hales was sitting there watching, and Joss said to him, Halesy, did you think at any stage that having been 90 for none off 10, we could just say, well, okay, you know, we need 260 now or 40, we can just bat and play? And he said, no need to do that. And with that, Joe Root hit a 4 off the first ball of that over. And while we're having this conversation, he then hit a 2, and then he hit a single. So we've got 7 off 3 balls. We need 7 and over. And Josh said to Halesy, you see, look, 7 off the over so far. Morgs hasn't got anything stupid here. And with that, Trent Bolt bowling, Morgs ran down the wicket to him and smeared him over wide long off for 6. And all 3 of us just started laughing. And in many ways, it summed up where we're at as a team at that stage. We chased down the 350 with 7 overs to spare. Unbelievable win. And went to Durham for the last game. It was a rain-affected game. Owen Morgan got caught deep mid-wicket in the run chase, first ball off Mitchell Santner. And Johnny Bairstow coming into the side to replace Joss, who'd split his webbing, got 70-odd, played brilliantly, got us over the line. We won the series. And it was a fantastic win. It was much needed, but it could have gone the other way very easily. We could have lost that series 5-0. Yeah. We won the series 3-2, and this New England had been born. Confidence flowed through the team, and we kept talking about, we've got no plans. We're just going to go and play and see where we get to. And I reckon we did that for probably 15, 16 months before we started forming some sort of plan. That the Australian series came later that summer, and we lost that 3-2, 2-0 down, back to 2-2, lost the last game at Old Trafford, didn't play very well in that game. But the great thing about that was that Jason Roy, having got no runs in that series against New Zealand, stayed in the side and played against Australia. So it was Trevor's first series as head coach. And he took over during that summer when we beat Australia in the Ashes. And we played that one-day series at the end. And Jason Roy stayed in purely because he played for the team all the way through the New Zealand series. At no stage did he ever play for himself to try and get a score to stay in the team. And from there on in, it was just an unbelievable 4 years. And at the end, you know, to see them winning the World Cup, and I've said recently that I found watching the World Cup quite tough, but it was my choice. You know, I knew I was ready to move on. And the 2 people that I spoke to about moving on to take the Warwickshire job were Owen Morgan and Andrew Strauss. And I rang them both and said, look, I've got this opportunity. Am I being selfish walking away only a few months before the World Cup? And both said, no, it's the right thing for you. If you think it's the right thing to do, go and do it. And it was important that those 2 both said it was the right thing to do. And, you know, ultimately, and one thing that I've learned from Trevor Bayliss, winning games of cricket is not about the coaches. It's about the players. And I'll give you an example of that. Just before the T20 World Cup final in India, which we played and lost against the West Indies with the England team the year before, Trevor and I were set up to do an interview with Sky. Rob Key was going to interview us. And we're in this hotel room in India, and we're mic'd up, they're setting the lights. And before we start, Keezy said, I've got an opening question for you both. Trev, you've won the IPL with KKR. Farby, you've won the World Cup with Sri Lanka. You know, it must be great going into a World Cup final with that experience behind you. And without batting an eyelid, Trev said, well, nothing to do with us 2, is it? He said, we're just lucky. He said, we hit a few catches, we throw a few cones out in the morning, and then we sit back and watch the team play. He said, mate, we've never won a game in our life. And I looked at him and I thought, you're absolutely right. It's not about us, is it? And so Keezy had to ask another first question because he couldn't ask that one because he knew he was going to get nothing from Trev. So, you know, it was, as I say, I found watching England win that World Cup tough because, yes, I'd love to have been there. Yes, I'd love to have been at Lord's when they won that final. But I was in my front room, having driven back from Chelmsford. I listened to the last part of it in the car driving around the M25. And I reckon at one point I was doing about 30 miles an hour because I was so engrossed in the game. And I got home, pulled onto my drive just as we were about to start the Super Over. And I ran in and I said, it's got to be Wokes bowling the Super Over. It's got to be, what's Archer doing? What's Archer doing? And I was so into the moment. And then, of course, brilliant decision again from Morgs. And let me just tell you one little story again on that. Trevor and I, we played a T20 game in Sharjah against Pakistan on a series there. And the game went to a Super Over. And Chris Jordan had bowled terribly in the actual game itself. Normally, England's Mr. Reliable. He's your go-to man. Best Yorker bowler. Fantastic. And his Yorkers were waist-height full tosses and knee-high full bungers that were going out the ground. Anyway, it went to Super Over. And Trevor and I were walking down the steps onto the field to meet Morgs coming the other way. And I said, who are we bowling the Super Over? And he said, anyone but CJ. Anyone but CJ. And I said, yeah, I agree. I said, he can't bowl the Super Over. And as we got to Morgs, I said, who's bowling the Super Over? And he said, CJ. And Trevor and I both went, yeah, great decision. Brilliant decision, captain, like that, right? Anyway, so we discussed it. We discussed the batting order. CJ bowled the over, the Super Over, bowled the best 6 Yorkers I've ever seen, went for 2 runs. Morgs and I think it might have been Joss knocked off the winning runs and we won the game. And it just shows you that, you know, your perception as coaches watching the game and your captain's perception. And the one thing that not only does Morgs talk about the game in a simple way that people understand, he plays the game the way that he talks, so people know it's okay to go and play that way, and there's no comeback if you don't quite get it right because he's there. But the biggest thing, and for all of his, you talk to all of his bowlers, they will tell you the trust that they know he has in them is immense. Yeah. And there's a great example. The CJ one in Sharjah, that the throwing the ball to Jofra to bowl to bowl the last over, the Super Over in the final. You talk to Adil Rashid. Adil Rashid is England's greatest example that goes with the team. So the team have grown and grown and played fantastic cricket. Adil Rashid, from the start of that 2015 to where he was when England won the World Cup, completely down to Owen Morgan giving him confidence to go and do what he does. And we used to say to Adil every game, if you go for 80 runs off your 10 overs, we don't care. Yeah. The old-fashioned thinking used to be dot balls and don't go for runs. Yeah. With Rash, all the way through his 10 overs in the middle was take wickets. 4 for 80 is match winning for us, because if you take 4 wickets in the middle and David Willey's taken 1 or 2 up front with a new ball, Plunkett's come on or Woody's come on and smashed the length hard and got a couple out, the opposition have only got 1 or 2 wickets going into the last 10 overs and they can't hurt you. They can't take the game away from you. Yeah. So Adil Rashid's improvement and his performance for England over the last 5 years, I think 90% of that is down to Owen Morgan's captaincy to get the best out of him. But of course, Rash has got unbelievable skills, but to have a captain who believed in him and supported him and trusted him gave Rash the confidence to perform the way that he did. So, you know, I think Strauss in setting up that thinking and helping that group to come together, the combination of Morgan and Bayliss, one being the leader, who said a few words in Morgs, but was very strong in his leadership. And Trevor, a fantastic supporter of the team and of Morgs. When he needed to speak, he spoke brilliantly. But that combination was sensational for England. And it came together brilliantly. And, you know, to win the World Cup and to see England win that World Cup, all of that planning was wonderful to watch. But so pleasing for the lads, see them, you know, charging round Lords with a great big smile on their face like kids. I mean, that's what it's about, isn't it? Fantastic.
Brilliant, yeah. Just to wrap up, Paul, a couple of questions just in terms of your own experiences. Who's been the biggest influence on you as a coach?
Well, I've been really lucky that Colin Page at Kent, when I first started back in 1986, I still find myself saying things now that Pagey used to say to me then. Don Bennett, when I went to Middlesex, Martyn Moxon, as I said, has been a big help. A guy called Keith Lyons, Dr. Keith Lyons, I came across about 20 years ago down in Cardiff, and he's been a mentor for me over the last 20 years, absolutely no doubt. Steve Ball, a psychologist with England, helped me enormously. But in terms of coaching, Bob Woolmer, without a shadow of a doubt, would be the best coach I ever had the pleasure of working with. And Bob Woolmer, years ahead of his time, he was the first one to actually think about, using video to record bowlers' run-ups. He was the first one to talk about taking the ball in front of the stumps to break the wickets when the third umpire came in. But he had a coaching manual that he carried around with him, which was from about 1957. So he managed to keep the beauty of the game, but with the new thinking. And he somehow managed to bring the two together. And he was as I say, I thought he was inspirational. He could coach all aspects of the game. He was as good talking about fielding and keeping as he was talking about batting and bowling. So I think Bob, huge influence on me. But you can't help but be influenced by everybody that you come across. And I think one of the great things about coaching is there were so many great people out there from all sorts of sports that you're constantly learning from.
Yeah. We've done a few interviews now, a few features, and Bob Woolmer's name's popped up a few times, which is quite a testament to him. But obviously he's unfortunately not been with us for a while now, but he's obviously left a lasting mark on a lot of people in the game.
100%. Yeah, definitely.
This is a tricky one for you. Who's the most impressive players you've worked with in terms of character, mentality, so on, and talent, of course?
Yeah, I think I've been extremely lucky to see close up some of the best players in the world. I mean, I'm a huge fan. It won't surprise people, but I'm a huge fan of people with a bit of flair and excitement. So, Joss Buttler's the bloke. I mean, Ian Botham as a kid, got me excited and interested about the game of cricket. And he'll always be a hero of mine. I love the way that he played the game. So, a Joss Buttler is someone that in the modern game, Ben Stokes, I see how hard those two work to where they get to. Joe Root, Joe Root is a bloke that is constantly trying to be the best that he can be every day. And I was very lucky that when I came into the England setup, Anderson, Broad, Root and Cook were four players. They had a bit of edge about them, a bit different. They're absolute winners. People talk about Jimmy and Broady being difficult to manage. They're not difficult to manage. They're just winners. They just expect to win, and they expect everyone around them to do their job to enable their team to win. And whether that's, us setting up drills and practice a day before a game, giving them information, opposition, batsmen doing their job, slip fielders doing their job, they expect people to do their jobs, and they're winners. And that's, I think, Root would definitely have to be up there as one of the most impressive. And then, with Sri Lanka, that there's no question, Jaya Ward and Sangakkara, that they were two very different players. Sangakkara looked at a lot of video. He technically understood his game, worked his game out. He knew everything about his game. He'd asked lots of questions about his game. Mahela, on the other hand, completely instinctive, played purely on instinct, didn't look at videos, didn't hit a ball on the day of a game. He used to catch 20 catches off the face of the bat, and that was the only time he ever had a net. Really? He netted before the games, the days before. But on the morning of the game, he never hit a ball. Didn't even have throwdowns. He caught 20 balls off the face, went and played. I mean, instinct versus absolute technical ability, technical knowledge. Mahela, pleasing on the eye to watch. Sangha was as well. But Sangha, nth degree in detail. And they, without a shadow of a doubt, they drove one another on. They drove one another on without any doubt at all. But I think probably the one person who made the most of his career, and I was very lucky that I saw him from the age of 13 through to his final test match. And so it was an exciting, interesting learning for me, is Alistair Cook. And in Alistair Cook is the greatest example to any sportsman in the world, sportsman, sportswoman, that if you work hard enough, if you're dedicated enough and you've got the drive and determination to succeed every single day, and it sounds easy to say make the most of every day and work hard every day, but it takes a lot of courage to do that. It takes a lot of guts, because you've got to sacrifice so much. You've got to go through so much pain and suffering and a lot of tough days. But Alistair Cook, for me, would be the greatest example of somebody that made the most of every bit of ability that he's got in his body. And, you know, England's leading catcher, England's leading run scorer in Test match cricket, captained his country to Ashes wins, home and away. I mean, the bloke for me has just made the most of everything. And I have to say, I'll be really honest, you know, people can say, you know, people talk about Wayne Rooney and say at 15 they knew he was going to be a Premiership and England international. At 15, I couldn't tell you that Alistair Cook was going to be an England international. I honestly couldn't tell you that. But at something between the age of 17 and 19, turned the corner, and Cookie made the most of every bit of ability that he ever had. So when I first met him at the age of 13, he batted about number 7 in Kent wicket. And by the time under 15s, I batted him at number 3 in the England under 15 team. And then obviously, well, someone else saw a bit more in him than I did, and he ended up opening the bat, and he didn't do too bad a job, did he, in the end? So he would be my absolute, in terms of make the most of everything. But don't get me wrong, to stay at the top of international sport, you've got to be unbelievably dedicated, unbelievably disciplined. You've got to have a mindset where every day you push yourself. And as I say, in terms of the modern day example, then Ben Stokes is going to take some beating. You know, and every player that goes into that England team now, they don't need to ask how to do it. They just need to look at Ben Stokes. And there's brilliant motivation itself.
Brilliant, brilliant. Farby, that's a brilliant interview, mate. Some great insights, plenty for everyone to learn from listening to that. Thanks very much for your time.
Brilliant, Darren. Thank you.
It's great, mate. And good luck with Warwickshire this season when we eventually get playing.
Fantastic. Thank you very much indeed. Great chatting to you.
Hope you enjoyed today's interview with Paul. Some fascinating insights into his time winning the World Cup with Sri Lanka, and obviously the build up to the England World Cup win last year. We've also got some great coaching tips coming from Paul in the near future as well, so keep a lookout for them. And we've got coming soon another interview with none other than England Managing Director Giles. So please look out for that, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Thank you. Bye.